Greetings, Padawan. We are going to talk about one of my favorite authors from this period, and that is Mark Twain. And you probably know that his name really isn't Mark Twain, but I bet you don't know that he actually has 29 names. He wrote under all different kinds of names, and one of my favorites is he used to do sketches, humorous sketches, and he would sign them with the name Josh. So that's a cool little fact about Mark Twain. One of the reasons we love him so much is because he is funny. He's one of our first humorists, and some call him our very first rock star. We're going to talk about why that is. And he just, even for this period of, this somber period in American history, we've just had this war. We have all this poverty. He grew up in poverty. He was a preemie, so he was never expected to make it. Even his own mother said she didn't think he'd make it. Even despite all the challenges, he sort of rose out of the ashes, and it really brings to light the voice of the American West and the American South to populations who didn't know about it. And he uses regional language. So he gives us, sort of our first television production, in writing of what it was like to live in the South. So he grew up on the banks of the Mississippi River, and he was poor. His family was poor. They didn't have money. His father had a bunch of failed business ventures. So by the time he was 18, he had traveled 2,000 miles. Now keep in mind, what's the mode of travel? Either you walk or you ride a horse or you're on a steamboat, right? So he had traveled over 2,000 miles, and he was working as a newspaper reporter, and he had lived in 3 major cities by the time he was 18. So, here's this kid that, rose out of the ashes and is out there just being an adventurer and writing and under all these different pen names, depending on what he was writing. And and his stories are funny. They're really, really funny. And we're going to talk about the problem of Huck Finn in a minute, but let's talk a little bit more about who he is. So he did marry. He was a devoted husband and father to 3 girls. And a story goes that he missed his daughter so much that when she went to college, he wanted to take her laundry just so that he could see her. And so he was very well loved by his family and by his friends. And he like I had mentioned, he was considered like a rock star because he went and performed as a humorist on like 120 steamboat ships, and he had like a stint in Nevada. He had a stint in California because he was trying to avoid the Civil War. And so like he like went around, acting as a humorist and talking about his work. When he was growing up, he had played in the slave quarters on the banks of the Mississippi, and Uncle Daniel became the inspiration for his character of Jim that's in Huck Finn. And we're going to talk about the problems that we have with Huck Finn today that didn't exist then but do exist today. So I'm going to make sure I took all these great notes because I didn't want to miss anything. So one of the things he's known best for is his ability to tell a good story. So no matter which of the 29 pseudonyms he's using, he tells a good story and he paints life humorously. He's very witty and clever, but he's also pointing out some of the things that are wrong with society. And, we all read Huck Finn in high school, right? Every high school used to read Huck Finn. And now we're seeing it being taken out of schools because Huck Finn, believe it or not, is one of the #1 banned books in America. And it's because it uses regional language. So think about when he's living and think about when he's writing and think about the words that were used to describe slaves by slave masters and by the poor people who also worked on plantations, right? So that language that we don't use today was very commonplace then, so it wouldn't have raised any flags back then, but the N-word specifically is the reason that it gets banned today. And so that's a difficult conversation to have. Do we throw out the work because it has those words in it, or do we read it knowing that, the taste and the flavor of how we write today would not include such language, right? Because the flip side is that it gives us an accurate sense of the the language that was used at the time to describe a group of people who were not thought of as people. So you think about Clemens, Mark Twain, and you think about the values that he's raised with and what he's taught about the slaves, right? What he's taught about that group of people. And the point of Huck Finn is to say, everything I was taught about this group of people is wrong. Like, this guy does deserve freedom. This guy does deserve, so either I have to change everything I've been taught so that I can accept that this man should be free, or I have to, figure out something else. So it really, one of the beauties of that book is really how this child is questioning everything that he's been taught. And I think that's a valuable lesson to learn, because how many of us, if you grew up in a religious tradition or you grew up in a political tradition, right? And what if you don't agree with what you've been taught? Like, you have to reconcile that with the people that you were raised by or that you grew up with, right? So, I think it's an important and valuable text. I'm actually diehard against censorship because I don't think we can apply how we look at how we would write something today. We can't apply those standards to how something was written then. But I think it's an important text because it really does highlight that struggle that we have when we become independent of those who raised us. So Twain, like I said, very funny guy, wrote all about the American West. His brother had been assigned out in the frontier, and so he kind of went along with him, and then he's kind of running around, and he'd give a different name everywhere he goes. And so people say, well, where did he get the name Mark Twain? Well, that's actually a shipping term, and there's two stories. One is that a shipping steamboat captain gave him the name. Mark is one of the terms used to denote the depth of something. The second line on the chart, it's like, I don't know anything about that stuff, but that's one story. But the more likely story is that it was given to him at a bar because he would drink 2 shots of whiskey, so the 2 Mark II, right? So he would take 2 shots of whiskey, and then he'd have to mark it on a board to settle his bill. So that's one of the theories of where he gets his name. He was fascinated by science and technology. So Nikolai Tesla, for whom the Tesla is named for, he was friends with him. He was friends with Edison, and he himself had 3 patents. So he was very enamored by technology. I think one of the most fascinating things about him is that he was born 2 weeks after Halley's Comet came, and he predicted that he would go out with Halley's Comet, and don't you know, he did. He died, it was either the day before or the day after Halley's Comet came in 1910. So he predicted that. So Mark Twain is just one of the truly best American fun writers that we have, but I don't want you to lose sight of the important messages he gives in his writing, right? So like I mentioned with Huck Finn, there's funny parts of it, and there's great storytelling going on, but there's also like a didactic or a teaching principle that's involved in what he's writing. So he's making a commentary about our society, but he truly, he loves America. He loves the expanding West. He's not Henry James, and he's not William Dean Howells, right? He's not talking about, the rich and gilded lives. He's talking about, real people, real issues that are going on. But he's doing it with humor and spirit. So that's why he's one of the most beloved American writers that we have. So I hope you enjoy reading his work, and I look forward to the projects that you're doing. So I'll see you soon.